Do you want to know how to spend a week in Toronto for £350? Flying into a budget-friendly airport and staying in Niagara Falls is one option, but there are others. I'll tell you all about them and how we managed it on such a tight budget. Right, the options I'm going to go through in this video include how you can do it for $350. However, we did spend a little bit more and I'll go more into that later. It was to do with the choice of hotel. It was a fantastic week and we even managed to squeeze a trip into New York at the end. Obviously that's not in the $350 budget. I'll put a link up to that later in the video so you can see it, and let's get into it. For those of you that have seen my method, I always start with Google Flights and a little bit of research by weirdly looking at Google Maps and seeing what else is around there. So rather than putting in Toronto Airport, I put Toronto and widen the search to include all other airports. Is actually three. There's Toronto Pearson, there's Toronto Billy Bob, which is unlikely to be on a cross-Atlantic flight, and Hamilton International. Now I don't know how they get away with calling it international, because I think the flight from Reykjavik is the only one that goes in there. And once you've done the Google Flights thing, you find out there's an airline called Flyplay. If you look on YouTube, there's loads of people done reviews and it's quite favourable. But basically Flyplay work by flying out of Stansted, which is one of the cheaper airports to fly from the UK. They're now also flying from Liverpool, Cardiff and a couple of others. But you fly into Reykjavik, you spend about an hour and a half in Reykjavik, you get on another Flyplay plane and you end up in Toronto. Can't be any easier. It does extend the flight time a little bit. I think flying direct from London to Toronto is about 8 hours. Your actual time in a plane going this way is closer to 9. But there's something to be said, it's quite nice to get off, even if it is just in an airport. Plus, I've never seen Reykjavik or Iceland. And the other key takeaway for me was as you're flying over, you also fly over Greenland and it's beautiful. You get to see how much of the world we don't use. But yeah, that brings the flights in at about 200 quid. Now the main purpose of this trip was for my child Bulk to meet their mate who lives near Toronto, and that was an important factor, and they've never actually physically met, but this person is their closest friend. So I wanted a hotel that would allow for them to stay with us, so I was trying to pin it down to a family hotel. But the reason I picked Niagara over Toronto was, again, price. The options for staying in Toronto were either hostel-style accommodation in central downtown in Chinatown area, or unused student residences that actually look quite nice out Yorkdale area. And of course, if you're doing that, you're not really getting the benefits of staying in Toronto because you're going to hop on public transport to get into the city. So as it happened, for this trip I chose to hire a car, but you really don't need to. So we widened the search on Expedia for flying into Hamilton, which is roughly halfway between Toronto and Niagara. So it came up with solutions from both cities. And we found a really nice motel in Niagara called the King's Lodge. It was a bit dated. There were cheaper hotels in the area. There was, I think it was the Lodge by the Falls. But that had a surcharge for parking, which is a bit of an issue in Niagara. And if I wanted a family grade room rather than just a twin bedded, it would have gone over budget. But that was the one, if you were just looking for a couple to go in at $350, you'd have got. If there was 4 of you, you might have gone for 2 rooms in that hotel. But the motel we stayed in was just on the outskirts of Niagara. It was like a 15-minute walk to the falls, 15-minute walk to Clifton Hill, but far enough out that you weren't having to drive through a built-up area to park, which for a limey like me that's driving on the wrong side of the road was really handy. And the parking was free. Motel was great. The porter stroke manager was absolutely fantastic. He saw that we were staying for a week, so he did what they often do with salespeople: up the stairs, furthest room away, which means you've got less people walking past your room during the day and night, which is always a nice touch. And it was right next to a Dairy Queen, a 7-Eleven type garage, and walking distance from some restaurants. Bingo, job done. Now, I'm going to move on to transportation and getting around. As I said earlier, we hired a car. That was because I'm one of these people that back home I'm not a big lover of public transport. I've since found out. I was a bit concerned because we were flying into a regional airport how we would ever get to Niagara from the airport, or Toronto if we'd been staying in Toronto. But I've since found out there is I think Flixbus have got a bus going either way that is directly there because of that flight. So it's not expensive. I think it's about $16 Canadian dollars, which is about £10 roughly. So you could actually survive quite well without a car. Like if you were staying in Toronto, the public transport there is amazing. If you're staying in Niagara, as long as you've got your location right, there is enough in Niagara to fill a week, and there is transportation links. However, in the back of my mind, I think I always knew I was going to try and make the dash to go to New York for 24 hours. I can't help myself. Now, I'm going to do a video about the short time we spent in Toronto, and I wish we'd done more in Toronto because it's an amazing city, but we went up the CN Tower, went to Graffiti Alley and just had a nosy round. Now, Niagara, as I said, there is more than enough to spend probably a week there if you do everything. We managed to do all the attractions in Clifton Hill. I did the boat into the falls, we did the journey behind the falls, went on the Niagara Skywheel, and we went up the Skylon Tower, which, trust me, if you're going to do it, if you do it during the day, do it again at night, but do not miss doing it at night when the falls are illuminated. That is well worth going up for, and it's relatively cheap as well. So let's break the cost down. Your flights you can get from as low as £200 if you go with Flyplay. If you were to go with a direct airline, Icelandair, and one of the Canadian, I think it's Trans something, they've got flights at that time of year. We went in May, which is a great time to go because it's not cold, it's not boiling hot, the place isn't crawling with tourists. We had no queuing for anything we did. Anyway, our flights were £200. The Falls Inn did cost us nearly £400 for the week, but that was for up to 4 people staying there. If we'd stayed in one of the cheaper hotels in Niagara, which looked just as nice to be perfectly honest, you could have got that down to about $350. So the hotels are probably potentially the more expensive option there. But as I said earlier, you could have stayed in Toronto for similar money, but you would have had less choice of decent accommodation. For example, the converted student accommodation, well, it's not converted, it's unoccupied. They were nice little 2-bedroom apartments with full kitchen facilities, but no no utensils. So you'd have still had to eat out, and you were a fair way out of town. Or the hostel type place in Chinatown did look a bit ropey, but that was cheap enough to get in at the $350. So, how much did you think it would have cost? I was pretty impressed with that price, I don't mind admitting it. You know, you'd be lucky to get a week in Spain from the UK for $350 each. But as you can see, I'm doing more and more videos about the cost of actually getting a budget trip. I've never been about doing the Insta videos, the influencer, oh, you must do this. Yeah, most of us haven't got the budget for that. The reason I can travel as much as I do is I compromise on what I'm doing when I'm there. But I think you'll agree the holidays I have been pretty damn good, and you know, we're certainly filling up that passport. You know, in just over a year we've done Tokyo, Bulgaria, Paris, Toronto, Niagara Falls, New York, off to Spain in 3 weeks' time. Sure, there's something else I've done, but anyway. Oh, did Krakow not that long ago as well. That's not a bad bunch of trips for a guy with a regular job, regular expenses. Yes, you can do the holidays that come in the thousands. That's great if you're only having one a year. I want more than one a year. It's that simple. So do like, subscribe, and comment. As I say, we haven't done Bilbao yet. If anyone who's watching this has been to Bilbao, let me know what a must is. The one thing I'm definitely doing is the Guggenheim. That's a must for me. But anything else, I'm an open book on that one. Or if you think we missed something in Toronto and Niagara, oh, I was going to put links up. There's a link gone up now to my formula for finding the cheap holidays. And there's another link going up now to how much we spent in New York. But if you go to the homepage, you'll see all the other ones I'm chucking up. Have a great time, and I'm happy with that.
So my friend has been saying that I treat my dad like an animal in a zoo enclosure because of the way I'm filming him. So here's what Dad has to say.
Can an ape drive a car? Hey? Well, obviously I think not. That is so weird.
It is, yeah.
It's scary, isn't it?
He's not got his hands on the thing.
The steering for me. That is just so weird. Whoa. Can you trust it?
I wouldn't.
It's doing it though, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, that's clever, isn't it? You've got to admit that's clever.